I'm absolutely delighted to be joined by the influential Tory backbench MP Jacob Rees-Mogg. Jacob, you are the leader of a group in Parliament, the European Research Group, which has got very clear views on the sort of Brexit that we should be negotiating. As I understand it, what you'd like is really a pretty bog-standard free trade deal with the EU. So you must have been delighted that the EU signalled that it didn't like the proposal that the Prime Minister put, which would have involved an ongoing role, for example, for the European Court of Justice.
Well, what the Prime Minister set out in relation to the European Court of Justice is something that any Eurosceptic can accept. Because,
really? In respect of medicines and chemicals and aviation?
The Prime Minister was absolutely clear that how we regulate our medicines will be up to us, but that the Medicines Agency, being a European agency, will be subject to the European Court of Justice. But that doesn't make us subject to the European Court of Justice.
But it does if she got her way of being an associate member, surely?
No, it doesn't. The internal rules of the Medicines Agency are subject to the European Court of Justice. But we have made a decision or not to join that, and we would regulate our own medicines as we saw fit. And we would then decide, if the ECJ came out with a judgment, whether we wanted to apply it or not. Whereas currently the ECJ is automatic law in this country. And that's a fundamental difference. So we accept...
Well, it's a fundamental difference, but if you're right that that is indeed what's on the Prime Minister's mind, and I'm not sure it is completely...
The Prime Minister's completely clear about that.
But in which case there's literally no chance of the EU allowing us into these agencies, because that would be a clear case of having one's cake and eating it.
No, it wouldn't. The Prime Minister is absolutely clear that the sovereign legal structures of both the EU and the United Kingdom must be respected in any deal, and that our law would be independent of EU law, and that where we were involved with agencies, we would make a decision either to accept or reject any judgments as they came along, in the same way as we do with the European Court of Human Rights. The European Court of Human Rights does not have direct effect in UK law, but it can be implemented by the British Parliament, which is why voters' rights, prisoners' rights to vote took so long to come through, because Parliament wasn't happy with that judgment.
Just to be clear, you're happy about our relationship in respect to Parliament's relationship with the European Court of Human Rights? You're happy about that?
That is a perfectly reasonable setup, because Parliament can refuse to bring into UK law a judgment of the European Court of Human Rights.
So something equivalent to that you would be
Something equivalent to that I think would be the best solution for the implementation period as it happens.
No, but I'm talking about the period subsequently. Would you be happy about that subsequently?
Well, the period beyond that, where it relates to agencies that we may belong to, but no, not as an overall superior court.
So just to be clear, if we could get a deal like that gave us preferential customs rights, you wouldn't be in favour of that?
It certainly shouldn't be the Court of Arbitration in terms of the trade deal that we have. That should be an independent body, as the Prime Minister has set out, as is commonplace in trade deals. The CETA deal with Canada has an independent arbitration mechanism.
Well, we'll see what we get. But given that you would be most comfortable with the kind of trade deal that Canada has got, wouldn't you urge the Prime Minister to simply get on and negotiate that? Because it's clear that the rest of the European Union is prepared to give us that, and attempts to get more than that are using up so much ministerial time, so much civil service time, that isn't there just a massive opportunity cost in trying to get something better, which you don't think will yield anything particularly for the UK?
I'm supporting what the Prime Minister is trying to do, because I recognise... Why? Because I recognise all of us have to compromise to some extent. So, yes, of course, from a perfect point of view, I would rather not be in the agencies. But that if that is the price to pay to get an overall trade deal, and if that is something that unites the country and the Conservative Party, then that is something that I can live with, because there won't be direct effect of European Court of Justice jurisdiction. Do I think the Prime Minister is right to argue for that? Well, I'm willing to go along with what she has set out as a package, and therefore I have to accept that part of it, though I'm less enthusiastic about that part than other parts.
Now, later this week, we'll learn from the Chancellor that very big debt on the public sector balance sheet is falling a smidgen in terms of the proportion of GDP, but it'll still be roughly 85% of our national income, still very high by historic standards. Now, lots of your colleagues think that this is therefore the moment for austerity to come to an end, for the Chancellor to be more generous in terms of funding public services. There are others who say, but the debt is still very high. Where do you stand on this?
Well, this is not the time to start spending money like there's no tomorrow.
Right.
That there is still a large debt and there is still a high annual deficit. And I think to exclude various bits of government expenditure, such as interest payments, is a mistaken way of approaching it. I think you need to look at the total figure.
Sure.
Having said that, there are some pressures in the public sector, particularly in health, where I think the government is going to need to.
So you'd like to see a more generous settlement for the health service?
I would like to see the dividend of leaving the European Union devoted to the health service. I think people felt that was promised during the referendum campaign. And the figures on health spending in real terms since 2010 is a 1.1% increase, whereas in the period of the Conservatives in government from 79 to 97, it was 3.4%. So we're running at a significantly lower real terms increase in health spending currently. And with an ageing population and with increasing medical sophistication, I don't think it's realistic to expect that the current levels of spending can be maintained.
And very briefly on the issue that is dividing the Cabinet, which is defence spending, where are you in terms of that argument? Gavin Williamson arguing that he needs a much bigger budget.
Well, we clearly have great threats to face. What has happened with Russia shows us, assuming it is Russia, but that seems a reasonable assumption, that there are serious threats to the defence of this country. And we read in the papers that the follow-up may be a cyber attack and that Russia has been involved in cyber attacks previously. We have to be very conscious of the threats that there are in the world, but there is limited money. And so the question is, where do you get the money from? And anybody who wants to propose increased spending needs to identify where it is coming from. And that is the challenge for the government.